Welcome to BOMA's Building Excellence, a CRE podcast series. This episode is brought to you by Kings 3 Emergency Communications. I'm your host, Alan Stein. Our guest today is Cary Fronstin, Principal and Executive Vice President at Foundry Commercial and a good friend for almost 25 years. Cary, thank you for joining us today. I'm excited to have you on the podcast.
Thanks, Alan. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah. So today we're diving into a topic every property team needs to understand: what CRE owners really want from property managers. But before we do, let's do a quick round of rapid fire to share with our audience a little more about Cary outside the office. Are you ready?
Sounds great.
Awesome. What time of day do you feel most productive?
I'd say midday, right? Maybe from mid-morning to mid-afternoon. That's my zone.
Yeah. Coffee or tea?
Oh, no brainer. Coffee.
Yep, 100% in that boat. If you could travel anywhere tomorrow, where would you go?
Europe for sure. Where in Europe is a tougher question. There's just so many parts of it I would love to see. I'd love to just see every corner of Europe.
Yeah. Well, now that you and Patrice are empty nesters, hopefully you get to do that a little more.
Oh, man, we're certainly going to try.
Yeah. Sweet or spicy?
Oh, spicy all the way.
Yeah. And if you could instantly learn any new skill, what would it be?
I'd have to say really being an expert and know as much as you possibly could with artificial intelligence, right? I know a lot. I feel like I know a lot, but I would love to just instantly be an expert at artificial intelligence.
I think everyone's trying to figure that one out right now, for sure.
Yeah, I can only watch so many YouTube videos right now.
Right. For me, it would be if I could go back and formally be trained on how to type and instantly be able to do that, because I never was. So I still have my own little method of how I've done it for 30 years. So
nice.
All right. So Cary, tell us a little bit about your background in commercial real estate. You've been doing this a long time, and what your role is today.
Sure. Well, I actually been in commercial real estate my entire career. I'm one of the rare ones who actually majored in real estate in college, and I'm still in it today, many, many, many years later. Actually started out as a commercial appraiser, which really gave me a great foundation in the valuation side of the business. But I've been in property management for over 30 years now and still loving it every day.
That's great. What in today your role is with Foundry? Tell us a little bit about that and what you're overseeing.
Sure. So I run the property management division for Foundry Commercial. We're Southeast United States based company. We have about 54 million square feet, and I help run the operations for our whole portfolio.
Oh, that's awesome. So having worked in the industry for so long, you know that the term owner gets thrown around a lot. To set the stage for our listeners today, who are we really talking about when we say the owner?
That's a great question. I think if you ask 10 people, you'd get 10 different answers, right?
Yeah.
I think most people, though, when you hear the word owner, you're thinking asset manager, right? Or maybe who your direct client is. But at the end of the day, the owners are the ones who take their hard-earned cash and invest it in commercial real estate in hopes of getting money back. That's a bigger pile of cash than they originally put into it, or getting monthly returns that are meeting their expectations. You have owners that you think are owners that are like these big institutional clients, but they're really just hired by things like maybe a plumbers union, and these unions have pension funds, and everyone's dollars are pooled together, and those they're hired. They end up getting advisors to say, okay, let's take X% and put it in stocks, X% put it in bonds. And we're here because of the percentage that they actually put in real estate. Many of these investors are actually from overseas. So some of the owners, quote unquote, aren't even here in the United States. But I think, based on what the topic of this podcast is, I think let's maybe focus more on like the asset manager. You're right. Your direct contact with them.
Yeah. So when these asset managers are up at night worrying about their portfolios. I call it their keep me up at night problem. Well, what is top of mind for them?
Oh, yeah, I call that Sunday night disease, right? Because we're all sitting there trying to fall asleep on Sunday, knowing what you have the week in front of you here. But I'd say right now, these asset managers, what's keeping them up at night is uncertainty, right? It's no secret that there's a lot of uncertainty here in the United States, in the world, and uncertainty isn't great for the investment markets, no matter what asset class, right? Uncertainty just makes it hard for people to make long-term decisions when you don't know what's going to happen around you in the world. So, and on top of it, right now, what's keeping asset managers up at night? If they have a percentage of their portfolio that's invested in office, all right. So, what are you doing with that? You might have a building that's 20 years old or so. It's a suburban office building, and you might even have great occupancy, right? You might be 80, 90% leased compared to some of the horror stories you hear out there that are getting torn down. And still, what can you do with it? Right now, it's still hard to actually make decisions that are accretive to the investment, like leasing up space of all things. Sometimes it makes no sense to pay leasing commissions and tenant improvements for these office investments when you're just not going to add a dollar to your overall return when it's all said and done. So, right now, unless, you could sell your office building for a really big discount, there's not a lot moving out there. So I say that's what's keeping them up at night.
Yeah, and I think that uncertainty, so many industries are feeling right now, and just what's going to happen next, and that the unknowns, I call it the uns. So yeah, it's tough. Well,
Exactly.
yeah, what can a property team on the ground do to protect NOI and really help them look good?
I think the best thing they could do to protect NOI is to protect the rent roll, right? The income side of that NOI equation has a much bigger effect on NOI than shaving a few cents off of expenses here or there. So when you say protect the rent roll, that means, put a proverbial fence around your tenants, right? Don't let them leave when their leases expire. Make sure you're just absolutely in front of them, finding out what their needs are. Don't just get in front of them when there's an issue, when their air conditioning isn't working. You have to go make an appearance just to see if that's working right. Go in there and just say, hey, what are your needs? I notice you only have, 10 people in the office today, and today's a Tuesday. It's not even a Monday or a Friday. How are you utilizing your space? And just try to get in front of them and find ways to keep them in your building. If there is a problem, and we know there are always problems in our buildings, act quick. Make sure your property team has quick response time. So just when that time comes for their lease renewal, that they just don't even think twice about just signing a year early or so. So protect that rent roll.
Yeah, and that kind of leads into my next question a little bit, which you've kind of answered, but I'm hoping you can expand on it a little bit. So, we talk about, obviously keeping the lights on the building and keeping your budget on track, but we talk about the tenant experience and how that tenant experience has kind of evolved a little bit. I would say definitely since the pandemic. And can you expand a little bit more on the importance of that tenant experience and maybe a little bit about how that looks a little different and what the asset manager's expectations are as it relates to that?
Yeah, and it's interesting because we look back in the pandemic in most people's eyes seemed like just a few days ago, but
Right.
here we are 6 years later, really from when it started. And pre-pandemic, it was an arms race for amenities. You had to have the shiniest equipment in your gym. You had to have the tastiest food in your cafeteria. Walkability, that was a really, really big word. And then the pandemic hit, and the office world shut down for a season. And when people came back to the office, it really became a flight to quality, right? The buildings that were maybe under construction during the pandemic or just before the pandemic, those were the ones that were the highest in demand. There are buildings that are brand new that there are waiting lists for tenants to move in. If that building were to go on the market, there would be just all kinds of capital trying to invest in that building. Now the tenant experience. Let's use that suburban office building that's 20 years old. You have to try to replicate the best in class, right? And that's not so easy to do. You may not be able to put in a fitness center. You may not be able to put in a cafeteria. You may have nothing in walking distance for lunch. So you have to do your best to try to bring everything into your building. And then you have to look at the return on those investments, right? Is it worth building out a conference center and a training center and a fitness center? Is that going to help your overall returns, right? So it's not a one size fits all. Really, you just have to really figure out what your tenants want and need to stay in your building.
And I think, to play into that, and maybe you can comment on it, is that even though you might on the ground see and feel and know this is what your building needs, you then have to convince ownership and the asset managers that to fund it and to make sure that the budget is there so that you can make those improvements and necessary changes to keep those rents flowing, keep them high, and keep the tenants happy.
Yeah, no doubt. And it's easy for anybody to make a recommendation to make your building look beautiful.
Right.
Right? Everybody could put on a fresh coat of paint. Everybody could redo the lobby. Everyone could redo the restroom. Everybody could add those amenities we were talking about. But those recommendations should always be given to the owners with the thought behind it of, is this going to add value? Yes, it might make your building look better. If somebody walked in your building, they may go, wow. But is that going to make an additional tenant move into your building? Is that going to make a tenant who's already in your building stay when their lease expires? That's where you need to look through the lens of when you're making those recommendations.
Yeah. So, recently and in some of the prior podcasts, we've heard the phrase that has been really, synonymous with the industry recently of "do more with less." So let's talk a little bit
Oh,
about
yeah.
what that is and what that means from a property management standpoint, and what the owner's expectation is as it relates to doing more with less.
Well, the owner's expectations aren't worried about the less. They're worried about the do more
Do
right
more,
now.
right?
Right? And because I mean, it's probably one of the biggest problems we're facing today. I mean, there's really been a pretty big shift in if you were to just make a list of property management responsibilities 10, 15 years ago today versus today, it's going to be a very big difference, right? Asset management departments used to be huge, right? You'd have a floor or two of just asset managers. Now you have a couple that work from home in a small office, and a lot of the things that they typically would do are now done by the property management team, and that's great. This is still a great business. I love every second of it. But what it's done is it's created a lot more reporting requirements that are really investment and strategic in nature from the investment side of things, and they push that down to the property operations team. So that creates a little bit of a challenge because we're all trained to get out there and visit your properties, make sure they look good, smell good, and that you're keeping them safe. You want to shake hands with your tenants, you want to take them to lunch, you want to do all of that. But when you have deadlines for all these additional reports, it gets harder and harder to leave your desk these days.
Yeah.
So, and on top of it, there is the less part. So fees are not as high as they used to be either, right? It's very competitive out there. So now you're finding that, managers have to manage more in their portfolio. It might be they had one or two properties. Now it might be three, four or more. So, being efficient is just super important to manage that additional scope.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And so, as owner expectations continue to evolve, how can property managers stay ahead of the curve? What role does education, industry involvement, and staying informed on emerging issues play into delivering value to the ownership?
Oh, that's everything. I go back to when I was at the early stages of my property management career. Education was critical. Uh, yeah, there was a flyer on the wall of the old manager's desk that it was an invitation for the next BOMA luncheon, and I was like, wow, that's probably how I'm going to learn more about this. So I went to the first BOMA luncheon that was available, and pretty much haven't stopped since. But learning trends and going into some formal education, I think, is really, really big. Obviously, the RPA program and everything associated with it, and now with its shorter course format, I think is a great way for managers to really learn just shorter bits of information without having to commit to 3, 4, 5 days, a week-long course. They can learn more of exactly what maybe they want to enhance their skills with in a short period of time, and for, a less expensive investment in that education as well. So I'd say just, you know, obviously, I've been with BOMA for a long time. I found it to be an extremely valuable part of my career, but dive in, go to the luncheons, get your designations, take courses where you need. I think that'll really help you stay focused and pay attention to trends. Uh, I've been involved in the government affairs committee for a very long time, and some people just aren't passionate about that, but it really does affect how things are done at your buildings, what mandates are at your buildings. So stay involved in those type of trends as well.
Yeah. I think that's so critical, and obviously BOMA, an organization like BOMA, provides the formal education and certifications, but also the network that you're associated with in helping to solve problems, provide, resources and solutions, to be able to tap into that network. And like you said, whether it be attend the monthly meetings or the regional conferences or the international conference, allows you the opportunity to constantly, be throwing out those challenges and solving those problems.
That network is invaluable. And don't be afraid to call up one of your peers and just say, "Hey, I've got this issue, and how would you attack that?" Right? And they may say, "I have no idea, but that's a great question, and I'd love to hear the answer." And then you kind of get a little team together to find out the answer to that issue. But time after time throughout my career, I've just bounced ideas off of people and have just gotten such insightful advice.
Now for a quick word from our sponsor, Kings 3 Emergency Communications. At Kings 3, we provide critical communication services to help people in distress. For over 30 years, our code-compliant emergency communication technology has helped property teams reduce risk and liability while providing a better experience for tenants and guests. When seconds count, Kings 3 answers the call. Your next opportunity could be one connection away. BOMA opens doors for you to build relationships with industry leaders, expand your network, and access education and advocacy to advance your career. Join BOMA today. BOMA International. One membership, limitless benefits, built for you. Welcome back, everyone. Cary, we live in such a data-driven world now. You mentioned this even earlier, how data is driving a lot of those decisions. How are teams leaning into data and AI to stay efficient and handle that heavier workload that we talked about earlier in the conversation?
Right now, AI is something that everybody should be using every day, every day. Uh, I mean, particularly on the administrative side, right? I mentioned earlier about how you have to be efficient. Well, how about getting 33% of your time back by using AI, right?
Yes.
Who wouldn't sign up for that today? Well, guess what, everybody? That's at your fingertips now, right? Uh, and diving into it is just critical. So many administrative things. I mean, imagine just putting your general ledger into AI and saying, create a variance report for me based on the information in my general ledger, right? How much of a time saver would that be? Now, of course, you have to review it. Just like anything else, if you delegate to anybody, whether it's a human or a robot, you have to review the work. But diving into AI in the property management world is absolutely critical. And I think as time goes on, I think the property management world will start using more agentic AI, right? So all these forms and reports that we have to do, I think it'll be possible to just create ways for a lot of it just to be automated. And it'll still create as good, if not better, reporting information to the people who have to report it to the ultimate investors.
Yeah. So that being said, we know that reporting isn't a one size fits all.
No.
So We talk about the importance of AI and the importance of data, but we know that some owners want real-time dashboards for every dollar spent and a level of reporting, while others just want a quick 5-minute phone conversation. How do you coach property managers to figure out what's most important to their client, which ultimately is the owner, the asset manager?
I coach them to simply have conversations with them when they're first getting to know their asset manager. Ask them, what's your communication style? Do you like to know about every single detail that's going on at the property, or do you want to know about things that are going to burn the building down? Right. And there are absolutely differences. And if talk about one size fits all, you could work with three asset managers from the same institutional client, and they could be completely different. Right. Ultimately, they may have the same policies and procedures that you have to follow. But at the end of the day, some might want to know every little detail, and some might want to know what color of flowers you planted yesterday. But I think ultimately, they want to know about things that affect the investment. Things like, are tenants moving out? Are tenants in trouble? Are Is there a tenant that's a very large tenant at your building and there are very few cars in the parking lot? They're not utilizing their space, right? That could be a sign that come to renewal time, they're probably not going to stay. Collections. One of my favorite lines from one of my clients early on in my career is he told me, he goes, Cary, you've heard in your training that the three most important words in real estate are location, location, location. He goes, that is wrong. The three most important things in my world are receivables, receivables, receivables. Have you collected rent? And he wasn't lying. So I learned real fast. I had to constantly communicate with him what was going on with collections, right? So you just have to know your client. You have to know their style, and you have to be, if many of us have multiple clients, right? It's not just one client in one building. So you have to know how to communicate with each of them. You have to get a feel for what works, because, a lot of times you'll be going into details about how you change things. Like I mentioned, the color of the flowers, and your asset managers are like, great, I know that's what you're supposed to be doing. But they want to know what affects the investment, because that's ultimately what their portfolio managers and their investors are going to be asking them.
Yeah, it's like really going into it with a very open mind, flexibility, customizing, what your approach and your response to their needs versus, rigidity in that respect, and just thinking that one size fits all, because yeah, I mean everybody's a different size and has different needs. So yeah, definitely, I agree. That's great to reinforce that. So not to touch on an area we don't like to talk about always, but unfortunately, sometimes it doesn't work out, and the property management company or team gets fired. What have you seen is usually the root cause of this?
So, there could be a couple of different reasons. One could be you're teamed up with the leasing side of the business, and there just hasn't been a lot of traction, whether that's the leasing team's fault or not. So sometimes owners like to make a change on the leasing side, and the management side just gets moved along with it. But I think for the majority of the people that would be listening to this, they'd want to know what would get them terminated from a property management standpoint. And I think lack of communication would probably be at the top of that list, right? I know that kind of sounds like an answer. Hey, if you have a problem, how do you solve it? It's like in any relationship, communication solves everything, right? But when I first got into the business, I was trained by company after company. If there's a problem, you don't let the client know until you have a solution. And that's what everybody did. You're like, okay, I'm going to keep it a secret that we have a problem in this building. But when I let the client know, they're going to go, wow, you let me know about this problem. You let me know about this solution, and you're my hero, right? That is not the way clients want communication today. And it has shifted a complete 180 on that. Uh, I think today it is important, as soon as you know about something that is a critical problem, And maybe to a lesser extent, something that may not be critical, but maybe it's more of just a quick email. Hey, just want to let you know this minor issue is going on. But it's important to let them know that you have an issue. And it's okay to say, I don't know how to fix it.
Yeah.
Right. Because maybe the problem just happened, right? And maybe it's not in your property management 101 playbook, and you have to dive a little deeper. Maybe you have to go to your network. Maybe you have to find out some other things. But you let the client know, and you let them know that you're on it, that there's nothing more important in your world today than coming up with an answer to that problem. But when you don't do that, ultimately what happens, there's other ways the client finds out about these problems. Maybe it's a tenant issue, and maybe the tenant has the owner's contacts, and then they reached out to the tenant directly. Hey, we heard this AC, we're having this AC problem. It's been going on for a month and a half now. And the client calls you and says, yeah, oh yeah, I've been trying to come up with a solution for that. Yeah, that's not the right way to do it. The right way to do it is say, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Client, I've had a air conditioning problem at my building, and normally you do X, Y, or Z, but that isn't working now. But I want you to know we're on it, and we have a lot of important people trying to fix this for you. So I think surprises, maybe to summarize this question, would be the thing that gets you fired. Nobody likes unpleasant surprises.
Yeah, and that's a great piece of advice. It's actually part of my playbook for new employees that I hire is that, if there's a problem that occurs, because they're going to, I mean, problems and challenges are going to come up. That's just the
And we're
nature
human.
of any industry. But to
Yeah.
hear about it directly from the source versus secondhand from someone else, that's the
Yeah.
difference there. And that's why you can't just try to hide those things until you fix them is really bring them to the forefront and make sure that, the client knows that you're not only you know that there's a problem, and if you're right, if you don't have a solution right away, let them know that this is the number one problem on my plate, and I'm working on a solution for that problem.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, the other piece of advice that I would give out there that I see so often nowadays is don't hide behind your computer, your laptop, your email.
Yes.
Pick up the phone. Call your owner or asset manager, and this really holds true for any industry. Your client in general. Have a conversation. I mean, that the days of those conversations might be not as strong as they were in the past when we didn't have emails and messengers and so on and so forth to hide behind. But it is so important just to have that one-on-one conversation, with your client in any industry, really.
Absolutely. And it helps when you're on the phone and they could hear tone of voice, and they could hear vulnerability. Right? Versus an email, which might sound good. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure all of us have written emails that you think is the nicest email you've ever written, and that the reader opens it up and they take offense by it.
Correct.
But sometimes when you're on the phone, and particularly in a critical situation, they can hear the emotions in your voice. I mean, highly recommend that with tenants too, not just clients. For some, when you work for an owner, tenants are your clients.
Yeah. That's a phrase that I use all the time. Don't be afraid to have that courageous conversation. So,
Exactly.
yeah.
Love it.
Cary, this is great. Thank you again for hopping on today. As we wrap up things for today, if you could leave property managers with just one key piece of advice on how to keep their building owners happy, what would it be?
I'd say get involved in all aspects of the investment of of property ownership, right? It's real easy to focus on what your playbook is and what your training is. But I think the managers that separate themselves from others are the ones that look at the their client and their relationship with them as just, hey, I have a job to do and I'm going to do my job. But at the end of the day, look at what your client's job is. And their job is to take that pile of cash that somebody took and invested in the asset that you're managing, and one day have that pile of cash grow into a bigger pile of cash. And if you understand that that's how your asset manager is viewing their day-to-day job, and you approach your communication with them and your focus around things that matter to them, then I think you're going to have a much better success on that asset and in your career in general.
Yeah, that's such great advice. Cary, thank you for joining us today. I always enjoy catching up with you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It was great talking with you.
Absolutely. A big thank you to our sponsor, Kings 3 Emergency Communications. And thank you, everyone, for listening to BOMA's Building Excellence, a CRE podcast series, where the conversation doesn't stop and the industry keeps moving forward. Until next time, this is Alan Stein, signing off.